goal, and there were lots of steps leading up to that goal that you had to materialize. But I don't want to spoil anything, Emily. Take it away, and we will. I'm going to go off screen, and we're going to monitor chat. But you're at the wheel, so
awesome.
Entertain us.
Thanks so much. Yeah, so everybody can see my opening question to the group. Have you ever set a goal that you did not meet? I'm going to pull up a poll. You can answer in the poll here. Have you ever set a goal that you did not meet in your life, big or small? I see the answers pouring in here. I'm imagining you don't need to ruminate over this to come up with your answer. I'll give you 10 seconds more. Have you ever set a goal that you did not meet? All right. Here are the results. Overwhelming 98% said yes, they have set a goal much like me, despite this opening story and the generosity with which it was described by Ryan. I have set many goals that I haven't met, like 98% of you. And the 2% of you that say no, I really want to get to know you and write a book about you because you are an exceptional unicorn. So why is it that so many of us then can say yes to this question? Right? It's actually a common cliche that the only things in life that we are certain about are death and taxes, but I think answering yes to this question also belongs on that list. That's why we have New Year's resolutions in the first place. That's why these things exist, because so many of us struggle and that we are constantly having to set or reset or try over with the goals that we set. So I'm a behavioral scientist and a social psychologist. What that means is that I conduct research on what motivates people, what stands in their way of success, and how we can do better. In the last 20 years of my research, there are a few things that I am certain of. That despite what other people say, when they try to explain to us why are we struggling when we ask for their help, we are setting goals. We do care and we are trying. The problem is that the way we go about setting those goals, trying to appraise our efforts and to motivate ourselves, is that those things that we are using as go-to tactics might not be the right course of action. So today, I'm going to share with you a few of what are some people's biggest challenges that they face when setting and inspiring their own progress. And I'm going to offer some solutions to those challenges. In all these cases, the problems and the solutions that I'm going to focus on are sort of centering around a magical superpower that most of us have available to us. And that's the power of sight, of vision, of our visual experiences. So my goal is to help you decide on a course of action for your goals that fits with you and increases the odds of your success and expands your toolkit of sorts, the tools that you have available to help you as you are setting and sustaining your goals. But first, I want to play a game with you. I would like you to put on your murder mystery hat. I want you to be a detective, to be a sleuth, and see if you can figure out who done it. Who is responsible for this murder that you're just going to get a few clues about? You're going to get a brief excerpt of this murder investigation and then the interrogation. Your job is to figure out who did it. Okay, ready?
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
Why, I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
Oh, did you get it? It went quick. I know. I said that the clues would come fast and you would just get a little bit. But did you know it was Lady Smythe? But now that you do you know why? Why does the investigator know that it's Lady Smythe? Let's hear the rest of the story.
But how did you know?
Madam, as any horticulturist will tell you, one does not plant petunias until May is out. Take her away.
That's right, madam.
It's just a matter of observation. The real question is, how observant were you?
Action.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
Why, I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
All right, so a little bit of a trick here, of course, right? A little bit of a trick for you. A little bit of a trick, right? But you were focused on trying to figure out this investigation. Maybe you were able to intuit or make a wise, educated guess that it was Lady Smythe. And maybe you were on to me at the next level and realized, oh, something else is going on here. Maybe you picked out some of those changes, but odds are you probably didn't get all 21 of them unless you had already seen this. What's going on here? And why am I asking you to pretend that you're an investigative detective, maybe assuming a British accent? Because I think it's a great example of one of the basic challenges that we have with not only how we see, but how we go about trying to approach our goals. How could we have missed so many things in that whodunit video when we were looking at it, right? We were watching it, and probably for the most of us, we didn't even catch that one thing change. Maybe not two things, probably most likely not 21 things were changing, even though we were really paying attention. Our attention is limited. That should come as no surprise. We have to pick and choose what we focus on. And right now, hopefully, you're paying attention to your screen and you're focused on watching me. And as you're doing that, you're not really giving much attention to the wall that's around you or to the floor that's below your feet. You probably aren't aware of, oops, that's something popping up here. You're probably not aware of what's happening in the room opposite of you either. If I were to ask you to focus on this picture and that glue stick and tell me all the details you can about that glue stick, in order to do that job well, you probably need to, in a sense, go blind to the drummer's triangle off to the right or to the word hi in the upper left corner of the duck that's up there too. We have to kind of, in a sense, turn off some of the things that we're seeing so we can focus our attention at the task at hand. In this case, focusing on the glue stick, or in the other case, focusing on being an investigative detective. Making sense of this scene requires multitasking. We have to really pay attention to far more than our eyes and our brain can really take in. And in a bigger sense, if we apply this to the ideas of goal setting, oftentimes we have to do the same. We need to focus our attention, but we don't give ourselves the benefit, we don't give ourselves that luxury. Oftentimes, to get through the many challenges of our day, we're multitasking. We're trying to take in the glue stick and the drummer's triangle and the word hi and that duck all at the same time. We often overload our cognitive system beyond what it's naturally inclined to do and what it can do really well. Let me pose another question to you. How many of you multitask? How many of you multitask at the things that you care most about? Go ahead and answer in the poll. Do you multitask to tackle goals that you care most about? I'm foreshadowing what I might suggest is the sort of rational answer here, but go ahead and answer honestly so we can get a sense of the room. I'll give you about 10 more seconds to weigh in here. And here are the results. Whoops. 81% of us, 8 out of 10 of us, are multitasking when we try to take care of those things that are most important to us, those things that we think are the most important. Those are ones that we are sort of dividing our attention among. This room is not alone. I have surveyed over 500 people, asking them the very same question. And what I found there is that over half of them said that they also multitask. Well over half of the 500 people said that they even preferred it. Not just that they do it, but they prefer it to single tasking. And of course, scientists have studied the frequency of multitasking and the utility of it. There was a really cool study I wanted to share with you, conducted by Laura Davish. She's at Carnegie Mellon University, and she looked at the minute-by-minute choices that employees make. She focused her attention on a financial services firm and a medical device company, and had her research team shadow 36 managers, financial analysts, software developers, engineers, project leaders for 3 days. Somebody stood behind each of these people with a stopwatch and timed them. How long do they give themselves an uninterrupted thought before they switch to a new task? or try to tackle two things simultaneously. And what this team found was that the average amount of time that employees spend on a single task before switching to something else was just 3 minutes. Every 3 minutes at work, we are switching to something new, we're toggling over to something else, or we're trying to simultaneously manage multiple things at the same time. And that actually went down to once every 2 minutes when people were working on electronic devices, when you're looking at a screen of sorts. These employees rarely granted themselves the opportunity and the luxury to focus their mental resources on just one project for an extended length of time. So that's what we do, but is it good for us? Well, to answer that question, let me turn to another cool study I wanted to share with you. This was conducted by a statistician at Emory University. He followed the experiences of over 145,000 patients that physicians in an emergency room processed during a 3-year period of time. He found that multitasking when the patient load was low was linked to faster rates of patient discharge. Physicians used the idle time in between attending to one patient and the next that was already in the queue to do their job more efficiently. When the demands on their time and their mental resources increased, the physicians doubled down on their job and they worked faster. So when the patient load was minimal, multitasking was actually efficient and functional and helpful. Now, why would this be the case? Well, multitasking when things are easy can improve performance because low levels of stress that we even put on ourselves can assist and increase cognitive functioning. When we experience something new or unpredictable, our bodies respond by producing hormones, including cortisol, adrenaline, and noradrenaline, the fight or flight sort of hormonal cascade that you probably have heard of. And those hormones help to prepare us to deal with stress better. And those hormones impact functioning of our hippocampus, the little bit of our brain, of the brain that's lit up here that I've highlighted in this picture. That's the hippocampus. These hormones also help our amygdala and our frontal lobes. Together, these clusters of brain components are the most important structures that we have for learning and memory. So to take a step back then, what that means is that multitasking indirectly engages the parts of our cognitive system that help us do our jobs better. The problem is that the benefits of multitasking have a limit. At some point, the cost of switching between tasks exceeds the benefits that low levels of stress can offer us. For those emergency room doctors, as the patient load grew, that strain of multitasking among numerous patients crippled their efficiency. More patients were discharged from the hospital without a diagnosis, which increased the rate that those patients revisited the emergency room within a 24-hour period of time. Their symptoms weren't remedied. The doctors weren't doing their job as well. So to put that into perspective, or to sum that up, when the physicians multitasked beyond the point where the stress was motivating and helpful, they were less effective at treating their patients and dealing with their problems. So many of us may not find ourselves in the emergency room, and some of us may not be inclined at all to become doctors, but there's still a lesson about this that is helpful and relevant to us all. So if we were to write a prescription for ourselves about how we should use multitasking, what we should do, it's that we need to use it strategically. So the answer is not multitasking is bad, and the answer isn't multitasking is great or it's inevitable. It's that it's one of the many tools that we have available to us to do our jobs better. So when something is easy for us, we have a lot of experience doing it, it's perhaps like below our pay grade, then multitasking is going to be effective and functional. It's going to help us do our job better, engage our cognitive resources, and give us something that's mentally exciting for us to focus on. But we need to realize, when have we hit that tipping point? When do we lack the expertise that would be required for us to do multitasking well, or to switch among tasks effectively? And when that point comes, then we need to focus on the task at hand so that we can harness the amazing ability of our brain, but direct those energies right to the thing that we're trying to work on. So that's problem one, is that we're not necessarily realizing how we can take advantage of what multitasking can offer and when we need to back off of it. The second problem is that we often stop the process of goal setting too early. This is a vision board. Maybe you've used one of these, maybe you've seen them in your home, maybe your kids at school have been asked to make one, maybe you've seen it in your workplace. These are really popular ways for inspiring goals. The idea here is that you create a montage of visual icons reflecting where you want to be in the future. You concretely visualize your goals and you hang it in a place that you're going to see all the time. Maybe next to the door on your way out, maybe in your kitchen, next to the refrigerator, maybe next to the mirror in your bathroom. And the idea here is that if you put that positive energy out into the world, you're going to continuously motivate yourself to direct your efforts towards accomplishing these sort of bucket list items for yourself. This is pretty popular, not just in people's personal goals, but within business as well. TD Bank actually conducted a survey of 500 small business owners and asked them, do you use vision boards in business? There was wild consensus that yes, these are used in business, and they're more popular with some age groups rather than others. 89% of millennials said that they use the technique to develop their business plans. 78% of everybody surveyed, regardless of demographic group, 78% said that they think vision boards give their workforce an accurate sense of where the business aspires to be in 5 years. And they're not wrong. These people are not wrong. Vision boards and strategies like them can be helpful for identifying what goals you want to work on. However, counter to the claims, they're no more likely to actually produce success at meeting these goals. If we stop the process of goal setting at simply articulating what our 5-year plan for the future is, not only is that not helpful, but it can actually backfire and decrease the odds of success. Colleagues of mine at New York University went about trying to understand why this is the case. What they did was ask some people to really focus on what that far off big picture goal is that they're working to accomplish, to think about how great it's going to be when they check off one of those items on their vision board or their bucket list. And my colleagues didn't necessarily measure in 5 years from now, did they accomplish that goal? But instead, in that moment, when thinking about articulating what their vision for the future is, they measured blood pressure. And in particular, what they were looking at was systolic blood pressure. Now that's the top number on your blood pressure reading. And what psychologists and behavioral scientists know is that that part of blood pressure is actually linked to our body's preparations for action. When we're getting ready to do something physical or even just mental, systolic blood pressure in particular rises in anticipation of us doing something. Now, what my colleagues at NYU found was that people who stopped the process of goal setting at just thinking about what their bucket list is actually experienced a drop in systolic blood pressure that was 8 times as great as those that thought about how awesome it's going to be if they accomplish their bucket list, but then started thinking concretely about what they need to do to get there and the obstacles they might experience along the way. Now, I live in New York, some of you do too, and others live in large metropolitan areas. So the idea of like finding ways to chill out and drop my blood pressure is really important. Like, I get it. But in particular, just remember what behavioral scientists know is that this is an indicator or an index, a marker of our body getting ready to do something. So what this study tells us is that those that were just thinking about what is it that I'm working towards? What is the mission of my company? What is my personal mission here? This indicates that they sort of were experiencing like a vicarious satisfaction of the goal. They were living in this sort of dreamland of like, oh, that will be great when that becomes me. And they were chilling out. Their body didn't have the energy that it needed to take the next concrete steps that they would need to make progress on these goals. So if we want to set goals better, let's put these things together that we've talked about. Yes, it's important to think big picture about what we want, but we got to take a next step here. We need to form a concrete plan of action. Let me give you some data to back this up. This probably comes as no surprise to you, but let me put it into context at how impactful and powerful this can actually be. There was a Dutch telecom company that partnered with behavioral scientists. They set a vision, they selected a vision board item and they set a strategic long-term goal. And that was specifically focused on environmentalism. They wanted to reduce their negative impact on the environment through increased sustainability initiatives. So they decided for the first few months, they wanted to focus on having employees recycle paper and plastic cups. So each department in this major company put recycling boxes out. They had a special team of employees focused on communications, telling people, you have recycling boxes now. This is why we're doing it. We have a vision for our company and you can play a part in helping us towards these efforts. But that wasn't enough. Just simply stating what the goal was, making it easy and convenient for people to recycle and telling them this is your opportunity to play along with us, didn't do anything actually to reduce the number of recyclable items that appeared in the trash cans. So if you look at the yellow bar here, this is at baseline before rolling out this initiative. About 1,000 items were showing up in the garbage that could have otherwise been recycled. 1 week after the program started, 2 weeks after the program started, 2 months later, the number of things being thrown away that could have been recycled wasn't going down. In fact, it was ticking up. Now, this isn't really that surprising. That's why this company partnered with the behavioral scientists to figure out a solution that would increase the rates of compliance. And so what this team decided to do is compare these results to another condition, another situation that they set up. For some departments, they paired this big picture thinking, here's our sustainability initiative and it's your chance to play along, with concrete action planning. So they asked individual members of these selected departments to think about what can you do concretely that will align with our goal. People came up with these simple statements. If I use a plastic cup, I'll throw it in the recycling. If I see old papers on my desk, I'll put them in the recycling bins. This isn't magic. This isn't rocket science. These are exactly the kinds of concrete steps that an individual could take that would be related to these recycling goals that the company had at large. But what's important is that each individual team member took a moment to think about that. They took a moment to think about what it was that they could do concretely that would be aligned with this higher level vision that the company had. And what was the impact then? Well, when they partnered this high-level vision for the future with individual planning, concrete action planning, what we can see is that when before this initiative was rolled out, these departments were throwing away about 1,200 items at baseline. But within that first week, that dropped to below 200. It stayed for the second week. And in fact, it stayed even 2 months after rolling out this program. And 2 months after, people just took that brief moment to think about what they could concretely do. What's also is amazing is that between that blue bar and that purple bar from 2 weeks to 2 months, the company took away the individual recycling cans and moved them to central locations. I get it that it's not really financially sustainable necessarily to put recycling bins next to every individual employee's desk and have those be maintained by cleaning crews at the end of each night. And that having a centralized recycling location actually is more financially sustainable for people. And yet what we see is that these individuals' choices could be nudged even when it was harder to follow through with their individual actions. So for me, what this means is that coupling big picture thinking with concrete action planning can help to translate our abstract and large scale ambitions for the future into something tangible, present, and in the moment, and it can have long-lasting impacts. When we set our sights on something big, like a sustainability initiative for this company or whatever ends up on our own vision board, the distance that separates us right now from that goal can seem challenging, maybe even impossible to traverse. I bet you that Dutch telecom company, when they knew that about 1,200 items were being thrown away, I bet they thought it would be pretty impossible to get that down to the below 200 level mark. To make that huge of a change, they probably would have been satisfied with cutting it in half. The distance between where we are right now and where we would ideally like to be in the future can make it seem very challenging, if not impossible, for us to accomplish our goals. And if we adopt that mindset of impossibility, we might throw in the towel too early. But what concrete action planning can do is to help us connect the dots between that far off future and the here and now. In my lab, we've been working to find ways to connect that future to the present. We wondered if we could design a new way to help people see things, to look around them that could make a far off goal seem closer and more doable. We've studied this in a lot of different domains. The first one I want to share with you, though, it focuses on exercise. We wanted to see if we could help people find a way to see exercise differently and perhaps better and more effectively. One of the things that we know stands in people's way is that sometimes if we want to exercise more, like these far off targets of places that would be great if we could just walk to that, we would get more steps in, can seem really challenging and perhaps impossibly far off. But we thought if we can teach people to look differently than they normally do, than they naturally do, we might be able to have real and lasting changes to the way that they experience exercise. So what we did was set up this context where we were going to test their running and their walking abilities. We created a finish line. We put a finish line in the space that we were testing, and we told people, narrow your focus of attention. Just focus on that finish line. Imagine that there's a spotlight shining just on that finish line and that you don't really see what's happening in the periphery. You try to avoid looking around at your greater surroundings and instead direct your visual attention right towards your goal. We compared the effectiveness of this narrowed focus to natural focus. We told them, here's the finish line, go ahead and look at this at the course as you naturally would. Maybe you'll notice the garbage can off to the right, the person off to the left, look naturally. What we found was that when we told people to narrow their focus of attention, first of all, we induced a visual illusion. We made that finish line look 20 to 30% closer to them than when they were just looking around the world as they naturally do. What's even more impressive is that when we looked at how did they do that exercise, how effective was their exercise, when they actually ran or walked that course and we asked them how much did it hurt, they said it hurt 17% less. Now, there's nothing different about the course for people who looked narrowly versus naturally. It was exactly the same exercise, but they experienced it in a very different way. Those that narrowed their focus of attention said it felt 17% easier than those who looked around as they naturally would, and they moved faster. They walked or ran 23% faster than if they were looking around as they naturally would. That narrowed focus of attention increased the efficiency of their exercise. To put that into perspective, let's say you're a man and you're considering running the Berlin Marathon. A 23% increase in speed would mean that you've just qualified to then being only 5 minutes off of the fastest time that was ever set in a record eligible course. This is Kenya's Eliud Kipchoge. He ran the Berlin Marathon in just under 2 hours and 2 minutes in 2018. So a 23% increase in rate goes from like hardly being able to compete at all to winning the marathon. What's also impressive is that we found that narrowed focus of attention can help people sustain better exercise habits over time. When we taught people this narrowed attentional style in our lab, when we were watching what they were doing and then said, go off into the real world for the next couple days and weeks, just exercise however you normally would. But let us look at what's going on with your health, with your fitness trackers. So we could see what are they really doing out in the wild when we're not there with our lab coats on monitoring what they're doing. What we found is that those people who we had before trained to use narrowed attention went out for 30% more walks in the week that followed. They traveled 60% farther on each of those walks that they went on, and they took 85% more steps than they did before. Narrowed focus of attention was inducing this illusion of proximity, bringing that far off finish line into the here and now, and increasing their motivation, their belief that they can actually do this, exciting them and giving them an energy that they need in the moment to exercise better. And that translated into wanting to do it more. In fact, doing it more and doing it more efficiently. So next, what I want to share with you then is I'm just trying to decide on time here. Let me tell you about how we can apply this to another context, right? Exercise is important to so many of us. It ends up being the New Year's resolution, #1 New Year's resolution that most people set year after year after year. But this narrowed focus can help us with more than just exercising better. Narrowed focus can help us with goals that require we pull something far up into the future into the here and now, like saving for retirement. The problem with exercising or saving for retirement is that we have to make choices today. But those choices we make today, or compromises that we make, the money that we set aside and put into our retirement savings account, or the walk that we go out for today, isn't going to make us lose 20 pounds right now and won't make us a millionaire by the time that we retire. But we need to consistently make these choices today that's going to have benefits for us in the long run. But the problem is that temporal distance is the issue. that retired me just seems so foreign. It seems so far off. It's hard for me to choose today to do something that's going to benefit a future self that just I can't even relate to. I tried a tactic meant to combat that that psychological mindset of greater distance that was leading my college students, all of whom had jobs, but none of whom were saving for retirement, to think about retirement in a different way. So let me share with you what it was that I did for them and the experience that they had. So that is what we did. We took pictures of my college students and we found pictures of famous, successful older people, and we morphed them together so that we could make concrete, we could make visual for them what they might look like, what their life might be when they were retired, so that we could contract that temporal space, make that far off future seem more relevant to who they are right now, and create a visual that they could latch onto that would connect their future self to their current self. Here are their reactions.
Oh God. That's terrifying. Oh no. Oh my God, that's so scary.
Oh my God. Yeah, I actually look pretty good at it.
Self. Yeah. Safe for retirement.
I'll definitely save more, and I'll start thinking about a lot sooner.
So when they before had told me that future self that's going to get all this money that I'm setting aside right now just seems so far away, getting to connect those dots and visualize what that far off future might be like made the connection between what they're doing now and what the future holds. And they had a whole different perspective then on their interest in saving for retirement. The takeaway here is that narrowed focus can motivate us to make better choices today that would benefit us in the far off future. The last thing that I'll leave you with then, before we open it up to the questions, is one last step in how can we set goals better. We've talked about thinking big picture, we talked about forming a concrete plan of action, but the last thing is that we need to foreshadow failure at the point in time when we are setting our goals. Now, this might seem counterintuitive that to better motivate ourselves, to get an energy that we need to help us take the first steps in trying to meet our goals, we need to think about all the ways that we might fail. How is that going to work? But it does work. The problem is, but we can't get ourselves to that place where we accept it and we try to do it. We're sort of stuck on the idea that we need to inspire ourselves, that we need to glamorize what that future might hold and not focus on the obstacles that we might experience along the way. We hold on to this sort of irrational mindset that we should motivate ourselves through inspiration only. I want to give you an example of something else that we hold on to that perhaps we shouldn't. And I'm going to use a visual illusion to illustrate this point. So what you can see here is this beautiful street, and a photograph of a beautiful street in Stockholm. My husband took this when we were on vacation one time. And what you can see superimposed onto this street in Stockholm are two cars, obviously. The car in the sort of upper left-hand side, further back on the street, looks much bigger than the car in front, right? Closer to the bottom right. It looks much bigger, but in actuality, it's not. These cars are the same size. So now you know that the cars are the same size, but I bet you're still experiencing this illusion. You still see that car on the bottom right as smaller than the car on the back left, even though I just showed you that that is wrong. We hold on to mistaken beliefs about these cars, but also about how best to motivate ourselves, despite evidence to the contrary. But that's sort of our challenge now. I challenge you to try to think about motivation in a different way. When you're planning goals, think big picture, plan concretely, as I'm sure you're already doing, but also take a minute to think about the obstacles that you could experience along the way and troubleshoot solutions in advance of experiencing them. And if you do that, you'll be better prepared to overcome those obstacles should you experience them. This is Michael Phelps. He uses this 3-step plan for goal setting. He did it probably most famously, not infamously, in 2008. Back then, he was he just had made it onto this international stage, and he was on the doorstep of doing something that had never happened in all of Olympic history before. He had already won 7 gold medals, and he was about to win his 8th gold medal if he could win this 200-meter fly. That's the one thing he had in front of him. It was his jam. This is the thing that he is known for. So it looked like winning 8 gold medals would be in the works for him, which no one had ever done before. But as soon as he jumped off of the starting blocks and into the water, his goggles started leaking. By the 150-meter mark, when he had just one length of the pool left to go, his goggles were completely full of water and he was swimming blind. Instead of panicking though, like I would have done if I had found myself in the pool, which I never would because I can hardly swim to save my life, he didn't panic. He calmly switched his concentration to his stroke count, because he knew exactly how many strokes it would take for him to get from one end of the pool to the other. He had already foreshadowed this problem of his goggles leaking. In fact, his coach notoriously would rip his goggles off of his head as he was diving in and then smash them on the ground, breaking the glass, I guess for dramatic effect. But to have him practice and not being able to rely on the power of sight in order to get the job done. So because he had foreshadowed this obstacle in advance, he knew exactly what he needed to do on that last length of the swim, and he did it. His mind wasn't thwarted, his abilities weren't thwarted. He won that 200-meter fly. He won his 8th gold medal, and then eventually he would win 15 more. So foreshadowing failure, it's an important step to the goal planning process that very few of us think actually would be effective for helping us through the process of goal completion, but one that's really critical and key. The last final thought that I will leave you with is a quote from this man. This is Dale Chihuly. He's an incredible artist. He's a glass-blowing sculptor. He's been wildly successful in his career with over $29 million in sales on average each year. He's found his sculptural genius, though, after he lost an eye in a car accident and couldn't hold a glass-blowing pipe, an artist that only has the power of sight from one of his eyes. He also dislocated his shoulder in a body surfing accident and can no longer sustain holding the pipe. It's just too heavy for him. So to redesign his approach to art, he didn't throw in the towel then and decide that he doesn't have his body isn't up to the challenges anymore. Instead, he said what he needed to do is take a step back and see his work from a different perspective. Those were really key words to me, this idea of perspective, teaching ourselves to see the world differently and being able to open up a whole host of other opportunities if we, with intention and with knowledge, shift away from what our natural inclinations might be and to adopt a new perspective. So his words here resonated with me quite a lot, and I hope they do for you too. What he's saying here also goes for how we approach our own motivation, our own goal setting, our own efforts at improvement. Some of us might be built to be daydreamers or doomsdayers. We might believe in our own potential and feel like we know exactly what we need to do to set goals most efficiently. But sometimes we don't. Sometimes we aren't as efficient as possible. Sometimes we answer that first question that I asked, have you ever set a goal that you haven't met, with the answer, yes, maybe even today. So if we can teach ourselves to look at our world differently, we might be able to imagine a different way forward. We can help and maybe expand the possibilities that we have for how we approach our own self-improvement and see things in a different way. So our takeaways then of some of the things that I've shared with you is think about using multitasking as a tool, use it when it would be helpful for engaging the wonderful powers of our mind, and tamp it down when we need to focus up because we lack the expertise. We need to dream big, plan concretely, and narrow our focus to tie the far off future to today, and foreshadow failure. That's what I was able to cover with you, and I'm excited to hear the questions that you might have in the 10 minutes or so that remain. Thanks.
Well, this is spectacular. Thank you so much. We have so many great questions. And Emily, I'm just going to cheat and ask a short question. I do really want to see a picture at some point in time of the goal shop where you had the women come into the pop-up shop. Because I think that's like the most brilliant example of goal visualization of all your work that I've encountered, because that's a little counterintuitive. Do you want to just tease it? Want to just tease it so people know what it is?
Yeah, I can. Yes. Do you want to just table it and pull up another question, and then I'll come back to that second? Would that be
Not a problem? No, it's not urgent. I just wanted to see the shop one day when I'm older. So Lucy's going to unmute people in the order that I put there: Peter, Deborah, Karen. I hope I say this right. Tiziana, and Anna. So Peter, you're up. Lucy, can you unmute Peter so he can join the fun?
Hey folks, how you doing? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hey Peter, where are you? Just out of curiosity.
I'm in Dublin in Ireland.
Oh, that's right. I saw you yesterday.
Yeah, that's right. Jeff's on a call with you yesterday. Yeah, so I enjoyed your medium where you were connecting to was it Mark in the UK via your Ouija board?
Exactly.
Yeah, so it wasn't really so much of a question. It's just, I suppose, what you were talking about there kind of brought a lot of clarity to different things I suppose I've heard over the last kind of few years. One of them being that idea of flow state, where you were saying about the idea of matching the challenge against your ability and sort of trying to stay in that lane where things are not so stressful. And really when you start to become overloaded. So is that the kind of same concept you were talking about?
Yeah, flow state is, a desirable experience for most people. It's when you lose track of time because you're just so in the moment. And multitasking pulls us out of that flow state, right? Multitasking requires that we don't, that's like by definition, we are not staying in the moment. In fact, we're trying to simultaneously keep track of this thing and figure out the points in time that we're going to switch between them. So there are many benefits to being in a flow state. That's when creativity is most optimal. That's when we're enjoying our experience the most. And that's something that we're doing a disservice. We're not giving ourselves that opportunity to enjoy that flow state or to get into it when we are sort of mindlessly using multitasking, allowing it to happen perhaps when it may not be most effective.
And also just one little thing as well was that idea of the vision board. Everyone kind of thinks about it and you kind of roll your eyes, like everyone has a picture of a yacht or a Ferrari on the thing, and it's okay, great. Everyone's going to have one, I suppose, if you imagine it. But it just brought me back to my childhood and the idea I've always had pictures on the wall, like posters of, this motocross rider or this person, and you'd go to bed at night, thinking about that as, and it always seemed within your grasp. But as an adult, then we just stop doing that and then wonder why we're kind of not so inspired anymore. So it just made me think maybe I need to go start ripping pictures out of magazines again and put them on the wall. Now I'm a little older. So
definitely. And then next to that, put pictures of the things that might pose challenges along the way and think about what you'll do if you'll experience those. We need our vision board and our obstacle board too.
Yeah,
Peter, yeah, I didn't want to make you feel bad, but the reason that I put a background on the screen is because I'm on my yacht in the Mediterranean. Oh, okay. Yeah. I just didn't want anybody to know or feel bad. Don't
worry about it.
Thanks so much, Peter. We appreciate it. Okay, Lucy, who's up next? Oh, it's Deborah. There she is. Deborah, come on down. Tell us what your question is.
Great. I added Deborah, but if not, we can move on.
I can take a second here and show you what Ryan was talking about, this store, this goal store that we were talking about, why Deborah unmutes. So this is the goal store here. I partnered with Nestle, and we were trying to figure out how can we inspire, what's another technique that we can use to inspire people to figure out what those visions for themselves should be, because that's no small task, right? Thinking about where you want to be in the future can be a challenge for so many people. And so if vision boards help you get there, great. Don't stop doing that. Just remember there's a few more steps you need to do in order to increase the odds that you accomplish those visions for yourself. But here's something else that Nestle and I tried, which was that we created a store. And we had people shop our store along with somebody that was a really important person in their life, a source of social support that not only was just like their cheerleader, but somebody who could play devil's advocate with them. So they went shopping with this person. And so here's the outside of the store. We called it the It All store. What does having it all mean for you? And inside the store, what we had done was fill the shelves with items like this, the canisters that represented one choice you would make with respect to your marital status, or How many hours of sleep would be ideal for you? Or, what kind of job do you want to have? How much money do you want to make? And people were filling their baskets with these items, making choices in all these different domains. But what we had done by intention is that, making a choice, maximizing in this one domain would take up more of their shopping cart than if they had tried to maximize in another domain as well. So they had to make tough choices, and they were doing that in consultation with somebody that was an important source of social support in their life. Now, what we found was that these conversations and calling somebody into this process of decision making, when you're thinking about how can I draft sort of this ideal vision of what my future should look like, these women, 89% of these women made more ambitious choices when they were consulting somebody about their high-level vision for their future that they believed had their back, but also somebody that would play devil's advocate with them. That wasn't just the cheerleader. What's also interesting to us was that 77% of those women made choices in areas that mattered most to them. So these conversations, we rarely give ourselves a chance to have these kinds of conversations where we stop and think like, what do I want for my career and my family and my personal life and for my health and with my friendships and with my sleep, all of this at the same time. Sometimes the world pushes us to maximize or to think about just one domain at a time. But if we do that, and if we do that in consultation with somebody that we might consider a part of our personal board of directors, we can see that it can help give us a clarity that we might not have on our own.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. I thought that was such a creative way to materialize goals. And I can't imagine the math behind that. Measuring your cylinders and your shopping carts. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant.
Thank you.
Dr. Beard, question.
Okay. Good morning, Dr. Emily, and thank you for such an awesome presentation.
Thank you.
I work with people who are giving up risky behaviors. For instance, I work with people who want to give up smoking. So I was wondering, is there a way to narrow the focus when you want to prevent a behavior or you'd like people to give up a behavior?
Yeah, this is a really challenging one because it's not just about our psychology and our motivation, it's also about physical addiction, right? And you know that as a doctor that's working with these patients, there's a real physical need that our body has to overcome in addition to all the mental baggage that's required in order to make progress on that kind of a goal. So there is no one solution or one component of the formula that's going to make success for those specific issues, but there are things that we can do that can help, that can be complements or additional tools within the toolbox that I'm sure you're already offering them. I like to think about it in terms of visual sparks. So when we have an automatic link, the way our brain is set up is that perception is automatically linked to behavior. We see something that automatically inspires action. We see cigarettes, we automatically feel at least a knee-jerk reaction to want to smoke, if not pull one out of the pack and start to smoke. The same thing with eating. If you're trying to curb unhealthy eating, what do people advise? Don't buy junk food. Don't have that junk food in your house so that it will be even harder for you to have to snack on it. You'd have to leave the house, go to the bodega in order to find a bag of chips for you to eat those chips, because what we see predicts what we do. So hide the cigarettes. Ask a friend to hold on to the cigarettes if you can't get to yourself to the place yet in the process of curbing this addiction, is to make them just not as easy to see. Out of sight literally means out of mind, out of body. So that is one tactic that calls upon the power of our visual experience that really is key. We need to make it harder for ourselves to do the thing that we want to do less of.
Thank you.
Which is so interesting because the other day I went into a 7-Eleven, and the guy, it's all cigarettes when you check out. I'm not a smoker, but he's like, we have a sale on cigarettes. I'm like, I really don't care, but they're right there, prominently displayed, right?
Totally. And Google was like probably, Google's famous for many things. One of them is all the free food, all the free snacks that they offer their employees, that you turn any corner and there's a snack table. There's a little kitchenette that has like these delicious, tempting, unhealthy snacks for the most part. And they realized early on that what was such a great lure for getting employees to take the job and then to stay at their desk during the day and not leave was to have all these snacks available, but they were making their employees fat. They were seeing that they were making their employees unhealthy, that weight gain was increasing because of a choice that Google made for honestly their bottom line, to keep employees in seats. So they didn't want to get rid of the snacks because that's like what Google is known for. So what they did was just make the unhealthy snacks harder to see. they put the M&Ms rather than in clear containers in opaque containers. They put the sodas on lower shelves in the refrigerators and put bottles of water higher up, or put them behind frosted glass doors in the little refrigerators. And what they found by having the people who restock all of these snack carts each day and counting how many unhealthy items needed to be restocked was that essentially they cut calorie consumption by 300 calories in a week for people. That consumption of the unhealthy snacks went down. The snacks weren't removed, they just made them harder to see, and that helps people, nudge people into making healthier choices.
Yeah, awesome, classic example. And Dr. Beard, if you email me, ryan@irrationallabs.com, very cryptic email address. Dr. Art Markman down at UT Austin has a great blog about smoking cessation and replacement behaviors. So I can send that your way, because as Emily said, there's always a multitude of tactics. It's never just one thing. Emily, I want to be mindful of time. Do you want to take another question? Are you able, or do you
I'm able, and I will leave it to you to decide when to cut us off. That's fine.
Oh my. Well, welcome to part 2 of, no, I'm kidding. No, let's do one more question to wrap up. Lucy, who is next on our list?
The next question was from Tiziana. And I'm just gonna allow them to talk.
Cool, Tiziana, you're up.
All right, hi, good morning. Thank you so much for a great talk. I learned a lot. I have a question about the finish line example you showed us.
Yeah,
which is awesome. And I was wondering, how would you pick a quote unquote finish line when you're using different kind of exercise? Like, for example, using the elliptical, which I detest, or swimming, which I do like. But even when I'm trying to focus on counting the strokes I'm doing, I constantly get distracted. So do you have any advice of like creating something similar to a finish line for sports? They don't really have a finish line.
Right. So I hate the elliptical as well. These tactics will not work on the elliptical. You need to distract yourself to get through it, or just don't use the elliptical unless it's like, blizzard outside.
Right.
Right. It's just much, much harder to sustain motivation because it's just not as visually engaging. And that really is the key. I've worked with urban planners, city urban planners, and public health experts also to look at what happens when we are trying to exercise in visually poor environments, like boring places. This is what happens to public health when people get to live in visually interesting places. And the answer is people are much more physically active, and they're exercising more often, they're getting more steps in. All the stuff that I said, it happens when cities invest in making places more beautiful. So it's not just about like giving support to the arts, but it really is a public health issue here that we're talking about. When there's more interesting things to look at, then people are in better shape. Now, to get to your question specifically, that's because they can create more finish lines. There's more things that capture their attention that they're then sort of like drawn towards. They want to go check it out. So they will walk a little bit farther to get there. But it's also a distraction technique, right? There's more things to distract them from the hard work that exercise actually is, which is why it's so hard to exercise on an elliptical, because we're in a visually poor environment. It's not stimulating, it's not interesting. And it's hard to keep going. The little known secret here is that this narrowed focus of attention strategy that I'm talking about is more effective at some times rather than others. It's effective when we're getting tired, if we want to push ourselves a little bit further than we have before, when there is a finish line that we're trying to cross over, but it isn't as effective if we try to use it instantly right away. Paying attention, being a little bit more distracted, allowing ourselves to like take in the whole view when we're just starting out, when we have the energy, when our body doesn't hurt yet. And when we're confident we can get the job done, that's more effective. So really, it's about strategically shifting to a more narrowed focus of attention when our bodies are starting to wear down or we want to push ourselves farther than we have gone before.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
I still think it's going to be hard to go on the elliptical, even though I have this beautiful view. I put it on purpose so that I could look at this beautiful canyon, but even that.
Exactly. I mean, but it's a static image of a canyon, and our brains and our eyes get fatigued. They still get bored by that.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And building on that, I couldn't Google fast enough, but we do have the Science of Change podcast that IL puts out. And there was one episode on Peloton which is very interesting because they talk about how they visualize goals and of course how Peloton makes it social virtually. But there's also a podcast, I couldn't get that link fast enough, but a Duolingo one, and Duolingo is just crazy in terms of like, they use all the behavioral tricks there are to visualize and nudge and do everything to kind of help you actualize your language learning and visualize that. So with that, just so you know, this was an open event, so we will be sharing this recording widely, everybody that registered, and we had almost 230 people register, which is very exciting. And we had 100 people attending, because I didn't count it, but the computer did. So all those people, you'll receive a link of the recording afterwards. So stay tuned in your email. We'll also ask if you enjoyed it. If you did, let us know. I guess if you didn't, you could let us know too, but it's important to frame with, if you did like it, let us know first. So that's the first thing. So thank you to Emily for just a brilliant presentation. If you haven't watched her TED Talk, it's a must see. Some of you had that in your Cal invite. If you haven't read her book, it's an essential read, but there's also the great Big Idea Club summary if you want to read it quickly. So thank you so much, Emily. If you could all give her a virtual round of applause or throw some cool emojis up, that was amazing. Emily, any closing thoughts before I kind of do the outro?
Yeah, but like, I always want to close with saying, like, I don't have the one perfect answer for anybody, and nobody does. So if someone is trying to tell you, like, if you do this one or two things, then you will be as successful as I am, don't buy it. Don't pay money to hear that message, because all that we really need to do is expand our toolkit. We need a full and complete set of tools. You can't build a house with just a hammer or a hammer and a screwdriver. You need all different kinds of tools in order to help us nudge ourselves into making better decisions that are aligned with our goals. And so hopefully I offered you a few more tools that you can add to your toolkit today to help you on your journey.